The Apache woman whispered, "If you don't sleep with me, you won't see the sunrise." He had been walking for hours, guided only by the faint trails left behind by previous travelers and the distant sounds of wildlife. His journey had begun the previous day, full of hope and curiosity, but now exhaustion was creeping into his bones, making each step heavier than the last. Yet he pressed on, driven by a strange mixture of determination and the feeling that something extraordinary awaited him at the end of this path. Daniel had always been drawn to stories of old lands and forgotten peoples. The Apache lands, in particular, had fascinated him ever since he read about their resilience, traditions, and connection to nature. There was a sense of mystery in their stories, a depth of knowledge and understanding of the world that seemed almost lost in modern times. He had spent months preparing for this journey, studying maps, learning about survival skills, and reading every account he could find about the region. Every detail mattered because he knew that the wilderness did not forgive mistakes easily. As he moved further into the forest, the air grew cooler, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and pine. Daniel noticed subtle changes in the terrain. The ground became uneven, with roots twisting through the soil like veins, and the occasional sound of small animals rustling in the underbrush reminded him that he was not alone. His heart beat a little faster, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through him. He paused briefly to take in his surroundings, noticing how the light filtered through the trees, creating patterns on the forest floor that seemed almost magical. Every step he took felt like entering another world, one untouched by the chaos of modern life. Hours passed, and Daniel's legs ached, but he refused to stop. He reminded himself of the stories he had read, of people who had ventured into these lands and experienced moments that changed them forever. The idea that he might find a connection to something ancient, something beyond himself, kept him moving. He could feel a story forming around him, one that had been waiting for someone willing to listen, to observe, and to respect the silence of the land. By late afternoon, he reached a small clearing where sunlight poured down in golden streams. He decided to rest for a while, sitting on a large rock near a gentle stream. The water was clear and cold, and as he cupped some in his hands to drink, he marveled at how untouched and pure everything felt. It was a stark contrast to the noise and pollution of the city he had left behind. Here, the only sounds were the chirping of birds, the distant call of an owl preparing for night, and the soft rustle of leaves. Daniel felt a calmness settle over him, a momentary relief from the fatigue in his body. As he continued to rest, he noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. A figure emerged slowly from the trees, moving with an almost silent grace. Daniel's heart skipped a beat, not out of fear but out of sheer wonder. The figure was a woman, dressed in traditional Apache attire, her movements confident yet gentle. There was something about her presence that commanded respect, a quiet strength that seemed to blend perfectly with the surroundings. She did not speak immediately, simply observing him with eyes that seemed to hold countless stories. Daniel struggled to find words, unsure of what was appropriate or respectful. He remembered the cultural lessons he had studied, the importance of humility and patience when encountering someone from a deeply rooted community. The woman finally spoke, her voice calm and steady, carrying the weight of someone who had lived with the land her entire life. She asked him simple questions about his journey, his intentions, and his respect for the land he was in. Daniel answered honestly, feeling a strange sense of relief that she seemed to understand, that his curiosity and reverence were being recognized. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from the practical aspects of survival to stories of the forest, of the animals, the plants, and the seasons. Daniel listened intently, absorbing every detail, every lesson hidden in her words. She spoke of the cycles of life, of the importance of observing before acting, of understanding the world through patience and care. Daniel realized that this encounter was not just about reaching a destination, but about learning, about opening himself to a perspective he had never experienced before. As dusk approached, the woman gestured for him to follow her to a nearby campsite. She explained that the forest could be dangerous after dark, and it was safer to stay close to those who knew it intimately. Daniel complied, walking carefully behind her, noting the way she moved with ease over roots and rocks that might have tripped him moments before. The campsite was modest but well prepared, with a small fire pit and neatly arranged supplies. It was clear that she had spent much of her life mastering the skills required to live in harmony with the wilderness. That night, as they sat by the fire, the woman shared stories of her ancestors, of traditions passed down through generations, and of the deep respect they held for every living thing. Daniel listened, captivated by the richness of her experiences and the wisdom embedded in her words. The forest around them seemed to echo her stories, each sound and shadow adding to the tapestry of the night. He realized that this moment, this meeting, was far more significant than he had imagined. It was not just a chance encounter, but an invitation to understand a world that existed quietly, profoundly, and beautifully, just beyond the reach of most. As he lay down to sleep under the stars, Daniel reflected on the day's journey. Every step had brought him closer to a deeper understanding of patience, respect, and the beauty of living in harmony with nature. He knew that tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new discoveries. But for now, he allowed himself to rest, feeling grateful for the guidance he had received and the opportunity to witness a life so connected to the world around it. In the quiet of the night, Daniel felt a sense of anticipation. The forest, with all its secrets and wisdom, seemed to promise that each sunrise would reveal something new, something transformative. He drifted to sleep with a heart full of hope and curiosity, ready to embrace whatever the coming day might bring, knowing that he had already begun a journey that would change him forever. The first light of morning crept gently over the horizon, painting the forest in soft shades of gold and green. Daniel awoke to the sound of birds singing and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. The night had been peaceful, filled with a sense of quiet wonder that lingered in his mind. He stretched, feeling the soreness in his muscles from the long hike the day before, and reminded himself that the real journey was only beginning. There was so much to learn, so much to see, and the forest seemed to hold secrets that only patience and careful observation could reveal. He rose carefully, making sure not to disturb the small campsite where he had spent the night. The woman who had guided him yesterday was already awake, preparing a small breakfast over the fire. The aroma of toasted grains and herbs filled the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the forest. She smiled at him as he approached, a gesture that carried warmth and a silent welcome to the day. Daniel felt a deep sense of respect for her, understanding that her knowledge of the land was not just practical but connected to generations of experience. As they ate, she began to explain the plan for the day. They would explore deeper into the forest, visiting a series of sacred sites that had been part of her community's traditions for centuries. Daniel listened carefully, eager to learn not just the physical aspects of the journey, but the cultural and spiritual significance behind each location. He realized that this was not simply an adventure, but an education in a way of life that was profoundly connected to the natural world. Every step they would take today was meant to teach him something about patience, observation, and respect for life. They set off together, moving quietly through the forest. The woman walked with ease, her eyes scanning the ground for signs of animals, changes in the terrain, and paths that were safe to follow. Daniel followed, careful to mirror her movements and learn from her methods. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed alive around them. He noticed how the sunlight played through the leaves, casting shadows that shifted constantly with the wind. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and the occasional deer could be glimpsed in the distance, watching them curiously before retreating. Daniel felt a sense of awe at how everything seemed to exist in harmony, each element connected to the next in ways he had never fully appreciated. Along the way, the woman began to share stories of her ancestors and the lessons they had passed down. She spoke of the importance of understanding the forest, not as a resource to be used recklessly, but as a living entity to be respected and protected. She told him about the ways her people had survived harsh winters, learned to track animals, and identify plants that could heal or nourish. Daniel listened intently, realizing that these lessons were not just survival skills but reflections of a deeper philosophy, a way of seeing the world that valued patience, mindfulness, and respect for all living things. At midday, they reached a small clearing by a stream, where the water ran clear over smooth stones. The woman paused and gestured for Daniel to sit, explaining that this place was special, a location where many generations had gathered to reflect, rest, and connect with nature. She encouraged him to observe the details around him, the patterns of sunlight on the water, the shapes of the leaves, the sounds of insects and birds. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing himself to feel completely present in the moment. For the first time, he understood that part of the journey was slowing down, truly seeing and listening, rather than rushing forward. After a brief rest, they continued on their path. The terrain grew more rugged, with rocky slopes and narrow trails that tested Daniel's endurance. Each step required careful attention, and the woman guided him patiently, offering advice on balance, footing, and how to read the land for safe passage. Daniel was grateful for her guidance, realizing that her knowledge was not just about survival, but about developing a deep connection to the environment. Every rock, every root, every shadow seemed to tell a story, and he began to feel that he was learning a language of the forest, a way to understand and respect it on a level he had never imagined. By late afternoon, they reached a hillside that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding landscape. The forest stretched endlessly, a sea of green with distant mountains rising like ancient guardians. Daniel felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, amazed at how far they had come and at the beauty that surrounded him. The woman pointed out specific landmarks, explaining their significance in her culture, and how each had been a part of traditional ceremonies or stories passed down through generations. Daniel listened carefully, taking mental notes, realizing that he was not just observing the land but beginning to understand its history, its spirit, and the lessons embedded in every feature of the terrain. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the sky turned shades of orange, pink, and purple. The woman suggested that they set up camp nearby, explaining that it was important to rest before nightfall and prepare for the next stage of their journey. They worked together to gather firewood, arrange their supplies, and prepare a simple meal. Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not just in accomplishing the tasks, but in participating in a rhythm of life that had existed for centuries. Every action had purpose, every movement was deliberate, and he began to appreciate the patience and mindfulness that this way of life demanded. That evening, as they sat by the fire, the woman shared more stories, tales of courage, resilience, and the importance of community. She spoke of the challenges her people had faced, the changes in the world around them, and the wisdom that had allowed them to endure. Daniel realized that these stories were not just about the past. They were lessons for the present, reminders of the value of patience, respect, and understanding. He felt a profound connection to the history and culture she represented, and a deep gratitude for the opportunity to witness it firsthand. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds that were both mysterious and comforting. Crickets chirped, owls hooted in the distance, and the soft rustle of leaves reminded Daniel that the world was vast and full of life beyond what he could immediately see. He lay down on the ground, feeling the cool earth beneath him, and reflected on the day's journey. Every step, every story, every observation had brought him closer to understanding a way of life that was deeply harmonious with nature. He felt a sense of anticipation for the next day, knowing that the journey would continue to challenge him, teach him, and reveal new aspects of the forest and its wisdom. Before sleep took him, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He would honor the lessons he had learned, approach each day with respect and curiosity, and remain open to the experiences that lay ahead. The forest, with all its secrets and beauty, had already begun to transform him, and he understood that this journey was not just about reaching a destination. It was about learning, growing, and connecting with a world far greater than himself. With that thought, he drifted into a deep, restful sleep, ready to embrace the adventures and lessons that the next day would bring. The first light of dawn barely filtered through the thick canopy above when Daniel woke to the gentle sounds of the forest. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the fresh scent of pine and damp earth. He stretched his tired muscles, feeling the lingering soreness from the previous days of hiking through rugged terrain. Yet, despite the fatigue, a sense of excitement and anticipation filled him. Today promised to be different. He could feel it in the rhythm of the forest, in the whispers of the leaves, and in the distant call of a hawk circling high above. The woman was already awake, tending to the small fire that had kept them warm through the night. Her movements were calm and deliberate, as though every action had its own rhythm and purpose. Daniel watched quietly, appreciating the ease and grace with which she managed even the smallest tasks. There was a silent wisdom in her presence, a deep understanding of the world around her that came from years of living closely with nature. He knew that every lesson she shared was not just about survival. It was about seeing, feeling, and understanding life in ways he had never considered before. After a simple breakfast of toasted grains and fresh water from the nearby stream, they set out once again into the heart of the forest. The path ahead was steep and winding, but Daniel was determined to keep up. He noticed how the woman's eyes moved constantly, scanning the ground, the trees, and the sky, always aware of her surroundings. Daniel tried to imitate her, learning to read the subtle signs of wildlife and changes in the terrain. Every step became a lesson in observation, patience, and respect for the environment. He began to realize that the forest was not just a backdrop for his journey. It was a teacher, offering lessons in humility and mindfulness at every turn. As they climbed higher, the trees began to thin, revealing glimpses of distant mountains and valleys below. Daniel paused to take in the view, feeling a mix of awe and exhaustion. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, a living tapestry of green that seemed to pulse with life. The woman gestured for him to continue, and he followed, noticing how she navigated the rocky paths with ease, balancing on narrow ledges and stepping over roots and stones with practiced precision. He felt a growing sense of admiration for her skills and an awareness of how much there was still to learn. Around midday, they reached a plateau where the forest opened into a wide meadow filled with wildflowers. The colors were vivid, and the air was alive with the buzzing of insects and the flutter of butterflies. The woman encouraged Daniel to explore, to notice the small details, the patterns on the petals, the way the sunlight reflected on dew drops, the faint scent of herbs carried on the wind. Daniel knelt down to examine the flowers more closely, feeling a sense of wonder at the complexity and beauty of even the smallest elements of nature. The woman explained that every plant had a purpose, whether for food, medicine, or spiritual practice, and that learning to observe and respect these details was a key part of understanding the world. They rested near a small stream that ran through the meadow, drinking cold, clear water and listening to the gentle rush as it moved over stones. Daniel felt a sense of peace in this quiet moment, appreciating the rhythm of the forest and the simple pleasures of life close to nature. The woman shared stories of how her ancestors had traveled through these lands, relying on their knowledge of plants, animals, and the seasons to survive. Daniel listened intently, realizing that every story was a lesson, every experience a guide to living in harmony with the world. After their break, they continued deeper into the forest, where the terrain became more challenging. The path narrowed, with steep drops on one side and thick undergrowth on the other. Daniel had to focus intently, following the woman's instructions carefully. She taught him how to place his feet, how to maintain balance, and how to use his surroundings to navigate safely. Each step felt like a test, and Daniel began to appreciate how much trust and awareness were required to move through this environment safely. He also began to notice how the forest seemed to respond to their presence, birds flying away quietly, leaves shifting gently, and small animals peeking curiously from their hiding places. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast valley. The view was breathtaking, with rolling hills, winding rivers, and dense forests stretching as far as the eye could see. The woman explained that this place was considered sacred, a site where her people had gathered for generations to celebrate, reflect, and connect with the land. Daniel felt a deep sense of reverence, realizing that he was standing in a place filled with history, memory, and meaning. She spoke of the traditions associated with the valley, of ceremonies held to honor the earth, the animals, and the spirits that her ancestors believed watched over them. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley, the woman suggested setting up camp nearby. They worked together to prepare a small fire and organize their supplies. Daniel noticed how methodical she was, how each action seemed carefully planned and executed with respect for both the environment and their safety. He began to understand that living in harmony with nature required not just knowledge, but a mindful approach to every action. The forest, he realized, demanded attention, patience, and respect, rewarding those who approached it with care and humility. That evening, as they sat by the fire, the woman shared more of her personal experiences, stories of the challenges she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the joys she had found in living close to the land. Daniel listened, fascinated by her perspective, realizing that this journey was shaping not just his understanding of nature, but also his understanding of life. He began to see connections between the patience and mindfulness required in the forest and the ways in which people navigate challenges in everyday life. Each story was a lesson, each reflection a guide, and Daniel felt a growing sense of gratitude for the opportunity to learn from someone so deeply connected to the world around her. As night fell, the forest transformed. Shadows deepened, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air. Daniel felt a mixture of awe and humility, aware of how vast and complex the world was beyond his understanding. He lay down on the ground, the cool earth beneath him, and reflected on the lessons of the day. He had learned to observe, to respect, and to move with patience. He had seen the forest in ways he had never imagined, and he knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new discoveries. Before sleep took him, Daniel made a quiet promise to himself. He would continue to approach the forest with humility, to learn from every step, and to remain open to the experiences that lay ahead. The woman's guidance, the stories of her ancestors, and the beauty of the land had already begun to transform him. He felt a sense of anticipation for the next day, knowing that the journey was far from over and that each sunrise would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new moments of wonder. With a heart full of curiosity and respect, he drifted into a deep and restful sleep, ready to embrace whatever the forest had to offer in the days to come. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling warm golden light through the tall trees and waking the forest with a soft glow. Daniel stirred awake, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs as he stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. The night had been calm, but he could hear the faint sounds of creatures beginning their day, birds calling to one another, the gentle rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush, and the distant hum of a stream flowing somewhere unseen. Each sound seemed to invite him deeper into the forest, as if urging him to pay attention and learn more from this living, breathing world. The woman was already up, quietly tending to the morning fire. She moved with the same calm precision Daniel had come to admire, every motion purposeful yet effortless. He watched her for a moment, realizing again how much knowledge she carried, knowledge built from years of living in harmony with the land. Today, she explained, would be different. They would visit a series of sacred sites that had special significance to her community, places that had been used for generations to teach lessons, honor ancestors, and celebrate the natural cycles of life. Daniel felt a shiver of anticipation. He knew that these experiences would teach him more about respect, patience, and understanding than anything else he had encountered so far. After a simple breakfast, they set off, moving carefully through the dense forest. Daniel noticed how the woman's senses seemed heightened. She could detect subtle changes in the environment, small animal tracks, or signs of weather shifts long before he could. She encouraged him to observe, to notice patterns in the leaves, the wind, and the movement of animals. Daniel tried to follow her instructions, focusing on the details that had previously escaped him. Every rustle of leaves or snapping of a twig began to take on meaning, and he felt a growing awareness that the forest was alive in ways far beyond what he had imagined. As they walked, she shared stories of her ancestors' journeys through these lands. Daniel listened closely, fascinated by how they had lived in complete harmony with the forest, understanding the plants, animals, and seasons in ways that seemed almost magical. She explained that knowledge was passed down not just through words, but through careful observation and practice. Daniel realized that he was participating in a form of learning that was completely different from anything he had known. It wasn't about memorizing facts. It was about connecting, listening, and understanding life through experience. By late morning, they reached a stream that wound its way through a small valley. The water was clear and cold, running over smooth stones that glimmered in the sunlight. The woman gestured for Daniel to kneel and drink from it, and he marveled at how refreshing it felt after hours of walking. She explained how the stream provided not only water but also lessons, how to read the flow, understand where fish might gather, and recognize which plants grew best nearby. Daniel listened intently, absorbing each lesson, realizing that even something as simple as a stream could teach profound truths about balance, patience, and observation. They continued their journey, the terrain growing more challenging as they ascended a hillside covered in dense shrubs and trees. Daniel had to focus carefully on his steps, following the woman's lead and learning to move with awareness. She showed him how to test the stability of rocks, how to avoid disturbing hidden nests, and how to use the environment to find safe passage. Each step became a lesson in mindfulness, and Daniel felt a growing respect for the forest and the skills required to navigate it safely. Around midday, they reached a large clearing that seemed to glow with a special energy. The woman explained that this was a sacred site, a place her people had used for centuries to celebrate life, reflect, and teach important lessons. Daniel looked around, taking in the gentle slope of the land, the way the sunlight illuminated the clearing, and the quiet hum of life all around. She encouraged him to sit and observe, to feel the energy of the place, and to reflect on what he had learned so far. As he sat, he noticed small details he had missed before, the pattern of moss on rocks, the sound of insects moving through the grass, and the subtle sway of the branches above. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to him, guiding him to see and understand things he had never noticed. After a period of quiet reflection, the woman guided him to a series of smaller clearings and paths hidden deeper in the forest. Along the way, she taught him how to identify edible plants, how to recognize the calls of different birds, and how to sense the presence of animals nearby without disturbing them. Daniel absorbed each lesson with care, feeling his awareness expand as he began to understand the delicate balance of life in the forest. Every plant, every rock, and every creature had its place, and he began to see that his role as a visitor was to move with respect and humility. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a ridge overlooking a wide valley. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills covered in green forests, winding rivers catching the sunlight, and distant mountains that seemed to stretch endlessly. The woman explained the significance of the valley, telling stories of how her ancestors had gathered there to honor the cycles of the seasons, to share knowledge, and to connect with the spirits of the land. Daniel felt a deep sense of reverence, realizing that he was standing in a place that had been cherished and protected for generations. The history of the land seemed to hum through the air, and he felt honored to be a witness to it. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the valley, they prepared a small campsite nearby. Daniel helped gather firewood and arrange their belongings, feeling more confident in his abilities and more connected to the rhythm of life in the forest. They built a small fire, and as the flames danced, the woman shared more stories, tales of bravery, resilience, and the importance of community. Daniel listened closely, recognizing that these lessons were not just about survival, but about living a meaningful, mindful life. Each story carried wisdom, a reminder that patience, respect, and understanding were the keys to navigating both the forest and the world beyond it. Night fell, and the forest transformed into a world of shadows and whispers. Daniel lay on the soft forest floor, gazing up at the stars peeking through the branches. He reflected on the day's experiences, the challenges he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the moments of beauty and wonder he had witnessed. He realized that this journey was changing him in ways he had never imagined. It was not just a physical journey through the forest. It was a journey of the mind and spirit, teaching him to slow down, observe, and connect with the world around him in a deeper, more meaningful way. Before sleep took him, Daniel promised himself that he would carry the lessons of this day into the future. He would continue to approach the forest and life with respect, patience, and curiosity. The woman's guidance, the wisdom of her ancestors, and the beauty of the land had opened his eyes to a way of living that was harmonious, mindful, and deeply connected to the natural world. With a heart full of gratitude and anticipation, he drifted into a deep, restful sleep, ready to embrace whatever the next day in the forest would bring. The first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, bathing the forest in a warm, golden glow. Daniel woke slowly, feeling the cool breeze on his face and listening to the familiar symphony of birds, insects, and rustling leaves. Today felt different, though he could not put into words why. There was a sense of completion, a quiet promise that the lessons he had been learning were coming together, forming a clearer understanding of the forest, of life, and of himself. He stretched his tired muscles, noting how stronger and more alert he felt after days of walking, observing, and absorbing the rhythms of nature. The woman was already awake, tending to their small fire. Her movements were calm, purposeful, and graceful, as if she were in perfect harmony with the forest itself. Daniel watched her for a moment, marveling at the depth of knowledge she carried and the ease with which she navigated the world around her. Today, she explained, would be the culmination of their journey. They would reach a place of great significance, a sacred site high in the mountains where her people had celebrated the cycles of life and taught the values that guided generations. Daniel's heart beat faster with a mixture of excitement and respect. He knew this experience would leave a lasting mark on him. After a simple breakfast of toasted grains and water, they set off on the steep trail that would lead them to the mountaintop. Daniel could feel the effort required with each step, the strain on his legs and lungs, but he also felt a growing sense of determination. Every step was a lesson in persistence, awareness, and balance. The woman guided him carefully, pointing out safe paths, hidden obstacles, and ways to use the terrain to their advantage. As they climbed, she shared stories of her people's journeys through these mountains, the challenges they faced, and the wisdom they gained from living in harmony with the land. Daniel listened intently, realizing that the journey itself was as important as the destination. The path grew more rugged and narrow, with steep cliffs on one side and dense shrubs on the other. Daniel had to focus completely, following the woman's lead and carefully choosing each step. She taught him how to read the ground beneath his feet, how to sense the stability of rocks, and how to move quietly so as not to disturb the forest's delicate balance. He marveled at her ability to navigate the terrain with such confidence and grace. Every movement was purposeful, every decision guided by knowledge and experience. Daniel realized that these lessons went beyond hiking. They were lessons in patience, mindfulness, and respect for the environment. By mid-morning, they reached a plateau that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding mountains and valleys. The sun illuminated the peaks, casting long shadows across the forest below. Daniel paused to take in the sight, feeling a deep sense of awe and humility. The woman explained that this plateau had been a gathering place for generations, a site where ceremonies were held to honor the cycles of life, the changing seasons, and the connection between people and nature. Daniel felt a profound sense of reverence. Standing there, he could almost feel the presence of those who had walked these lands before him, their footsteps woven into the very fabric of the mountains. They continued along the trail, moving toward the sacred site hidden further into the mountains. Along the way, the woman pointed out plants with medicinal properties, showed him signs of animal activity, and encouraged him to observe the subtle shifts in the wind, light, and temperature. Daniel felt himself becoming more attuned to the world around him, noticing patterns and connections he had never seen before. The forest had become a living classroom, and he was finally beginning to understand the depth of its lessons. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call, every movement of water carried meaning and insight. As afternoon approached, they reached the foot of the final ascent. The climb was steep and challenging, requiring every ounce of strength and focus Daniel had left. The woman encouraged him, teaching him how to use his body efficiently, how to find secure footing, and how to pace himself for the long climb ahead. Daniel felt his muscles burn and his breath come in heavy gasps, but he also felt a surge of determination and purpose. This was the final test of his journey, a challenge not just of strength but of patience, perseverance, and mental clarity. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they reached the summit. The view was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, their peaks glowing in the warm light of the setting sun. Valleys and forests rolled out beneath them, rivers sparkling like ribbons of silver. The woman guided him to a carefully arranged clearing, explaining that this was the sacred site where her people had gathered for centuries to reflect, celebrate, and honor the cycles of life. Daniel felt a sense of awe and gratitude wash over him. He understood that reaching this place was not simply a physical achievement. It was a symbolic culmination of the lessons he had been learning throughout his journey. They sat together in silence for a long while, taking in the view and feeling the energy of the land around them. The woman spoke softly, sharing stories of ceremonies held here, of the values and wisdom passed down through generations, and of the importance of living in harmony with the world. Daniel listened, absorbing every word, every detail, and every lesson. He realized that this journey had changed him in ways he could not have imagined. It had taught him patience, mindfulness, respect, and the beauty of living in tune with the natural world. He felt a deep connection not only to the forest, but to the history, culture, and wisdom of the people who had walked these lands long before him. As the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, they prepared a small fire and settled in for the evening. Daniel reflected on everything he had learned, the skills, the stories, the observations, and the moments of wonder. He felt a profound gratitude for the woman's guidance and for the opportunity to witness a world so different from his own. The forest, the mountains, and the sacred site had revealed lessons about patience, respect, and harmony that he knew would stay with him forever. Night fell and the forest transformed into a symphony of sounds, the soft rustle of leaves, the calls of nocturnal creatures, and the distant whisper of the wind through the trees. Daniel lay under the open sky, gazing at the stars and reflecting on his journey. Every challenge, every story, and every step had brought him closer to understanding a way of life that was deeply connected to nature. He felt a sense of completion, as though he had gained not only knowledge but a profound sense of perspective and appreciation for the world around him. Before drifting off to sleep, Daniel promised himself that he would carry the lessons of this journey into his everyday life. He would approach challenges with patience, observe the world with awareness, and act with respect for the people and the environment around him. He had learned that true understanding came not from rushing or forcing, but from listening, observing, and immersing oneself fully in the moment. With a heart full of gratitude and wonder, he closed his eyes, feeling the calm embrace of the forest and the mountains, ready to rest and carry the wisdom of this journey into the future. When morning came, the first light of the sun seemed to shine with a new meaning. Daniel rose with renewed energy, feeling a sense of connection to the forest, to the woman, and to the lessons he had learned. He knew that the journey was not just about the places he had seen, but about the growth, understanding, and respect he had gained along the way. Every step he had taken had been part of a larger story, a story of learning, reflection, and harmony with the world. With the woman by his side, he began the descent from the mountains, carrying the memory of the sacred site, the lessons of the forest, and the wisdom of her guidance. Every movement, every observation, every breath was filled with intention. Daniel understood that his journey had come full circle. He had arrived with curiosity and left with knowledge, awareness, and a profound sense of respect for the land and its people. The forest, the mountains, and the sacred places would remain with him forever, a reminder of the beauty, patience, and harmony that exist when one truly sees and listens to the world. As they walked together, Daniel felt a deep gratitude in his heart, for the woman, for the forest, and for the lessons that had transformed him. He knew that the journey had changed not just his understanding of the natural world, but also his approach to life itself. Every sunrise he would see from now on would carry the memory of this journey, the wisdom of the forest, and the quiet power of living in harmony with the world. He smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of a lifetime of learning, respect, and discovery.